everyone, and welcome to Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. This is episode 375. I am James. I'm joined by Ryan and Spencer after an ugly opening weekend for the Brewers in New York. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first, hopefully some happier things. Spencer, we haven't talked to you in a minute. How have you been?
Good. Been very busy with the coaching stuff and off to a pretty decent start this year, better than we've had in a while. So that's been nice. Been a little easier to go to every night, knowing that we're actually, seeing some better results. But yeah, overall been pretty good. Definitely had the mood dampened a little bit over the weekend here, but overall pretty good.
Ryan, you're on vacation right now, but you're still doing this podcast. How you been?
Yeah. So I am now, we're recording at 3:45 Central Time here. I have now been up for 13 hours. Yeah.
That's too many.
Yeah, it's too many
this
hours.
time of day.
It's yeah. Frankly, or no, 12 hours at this point. Yeah, it's too many hours. I had to get up to get to the airport, and then of course, because I left early and I got there early, breezed right through TSA breezed right to the gate, and sat for an hour before boarding. So that was wonderful. But at least I made it back. But it was really cool. I don't know. You guys probably saw. I think I put them in our group chat. But I was at the Rockies game on Saturday at Steinbrenner Field in Tampa, and it was very much a spring training vibe. I've been to that stadium for spring training games, and it felt exactly like that, except this was a real game that counted, and you could barely tell the difference. So it was interesting. I was curious to see what the vibe was going to be like, how it was going to feel being in that park, in that situation. And yeah, it felt very spring trainy, which I guess, it's also that time of year. So
sure.
Yeah.
Brewers are still playing like it's spring training. I tuned into some of the opening day festivities there on Friday because it was just the only early game on Friday when I was working from home. So I just threw it on to have it on the background. Seemed like a, cool, at least novelty to have Rays baseball at home, quote unquote, outside. And it was really impressive just the amount of work they had to do to turn that stadium over in like 72 hours from the end of spring training to opening day. But yeah, there's only so much you can do when there's no like second deck. It doesn't, I guess, necessarily feel like a major league park, but maybe you can speak more to that than I can.
Yeah, it didn't feel very big league at all. Like that was a big part of it. You're just in a stadium that is built for spring training and minor league baseball, not a stadium that's built for big league baseball. So it just feels very small time as opposed to big league. But I mean, it was fine. It was fun. They did a good job. The way it was set up and the way it was handled, we had a very full crowd and it was fine. Everything was good. We were actually sitting near some Rockies fans. So apparently they still exist in the wild, in Florida of all places. So
wow,
that was interesting. And the Rockies, I don't know if you caught any of the highlights of that game. I popped on Quick Pitch as I took a little nap on the couch this morning or tried to, didn't really fall asleep, but it was even more great defensive plays than I realized watching it live. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That one happened. Oh yeah, that one happened too. Mostly by the Rockies, but the Rays had a few great defensive plays too. So it was a game. I think the Rays had 12 hits and scored 1 run. And it was mostly just because the Rockies kept making great defensive plays. Tovar had one and Brenton Doyle had one, which you'd expect from great defenders like that. So it was interesting, but not a thing I need to do a bunch. That's fine.
Yeah. You going to the home opener on Monday?
I will be there. Yes, I will be there.
Nice. It'll be interesting to see how that's juxtaposed with your experience in Tampa.
It will be colder and wetter for sure. Well, outside anyway. But hey, we have a roof, so
there's a roof.
Yeah, that's nice.
That is nice, and hopefully the Brewers can get back on track once they get home. I'm looking forward to baseball season actually starting on Monday. That's the way I'm thinking about it. But plenty of questions about what transpired over the weekend. A reminder for those who aren't patrons yet, patrons get question priority on this podcast and on reporting as eligible. Just go to patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month gets you that perk. Make sure that you get your questions answered both here and on the Packers podcast. $5 level gets you that plus the additional exclusive content, including the minor league extra with Ryan and Spencer. Sounds starting their season this weekend as well. I tuned into some of that. I don't know if you guys did or not. I saw Caleb Durbin hit a no-doubter home run, so that was kind of fun. Needed that bit of positivity after what else happened on Saturday. But yeah, looking forward to the start of the minor league season too, Spencer. Is there anyone you've got your eye on, kind of just seeing how they start at their certain levels or anything like that?
Well, it's probably a cop-out, but Jesus Mate.
Yeah.
I will definitely be watching Carolina and seeing how everyone looks at that level, because it's going to be a young team, and they usually are in Carolina. The Brewers have been pretty aggressive with young players, but I think it's going to be especially so on the position player side of things. It sounds like Mate and Luis Pena will be there. So, yeah, couple 17, 18-year-olds and a bunch of other recent high school picks, Braylon Payne, Josh Adamshevsky, just a lot of young dudes. So definitely looking forward to that. And Mizorowski had 5 shutout today for the Sounds. So that was nice to see.
I missed that. I should have turned that on instead of the Brewers death march.
That is good to see. I turned on the Sounds opener and I was like, oh man, it's Carlos F. Rodriguez, not Miz pitching. I was kind of bummed about that, but it turned out fine. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes as well, and you guys will recap all that action on the minor league extra. All right, let's talk about opening weekend, because it's the only games we've got to talk about, and we need to talk about it because if anything, it was at least historic. So, I always like to say, if you're going to be bad, at least suck historically. I guess the best thing I can say is that Freddie Peralta and Jake Bauers pitched well over the weekend. Everybody else, not so much. Of course, the Brewers were swept by the Yankees in New York to open the season. They did drop the first game 4-2, so that was at least competitive. We got to see Devin Williams almost blow a save against the Brewers on opening day. That was about the best thing that happened all weekend. They got clubbed, of course, 20-9 on Saturday and 12-3 on Sunday. It's the first time since 2015 that the Brewers start the year 0-3. And of course, the most notable thing about the series were the 15 home runs hit by the Yankees over the course of 3 games. And of course, that's what most of your questions are about. So we'll get to those shortly. But I guess let's start with opening day, because that was at least better to talk about. Freddie did give up a couple of solo home runs. It was sort of the harbinger of things to come, but the only mistakes that he made that day, he actually pitched fairly well. Vinny Capra, major league debut with his parents in the crowd, New York natives, hit a home run at Yankee Stadium. That was cool to see. But of course, the Yankees tacked on a couple of runs in the 7th inning before the Brewers loaded the bases with no one out against Devin. They could only score 1 run, though, and the game ended 4-2. So let's jump right into the questions. Michael Parr starting us off this week, saying opening day was a stupid way to lose a game, but those sorts of things tend to even out over a season. Why do you think they put Sal Frelick higher up in the batting order over Garrett Mitchell? It's kind of interesting. Obviously, the stance of the podcast is batting order doesn't matter that much, but it was interesting, Spencer, to see even on Sunday, Sal batting 5th. Turned out well, he had an RBI. So I don't know. Is it just liking more contact in that spot, or what do you think the logic would be there?
Yeah, Jack and I got a similar question on our podcast that we talked about, and I almost think there might be almost splitting up the lineup for Murphy, where he has somewhat of a power threat at the bottom of the order, where if you have Frelick hitting 7th, you're almost going Mitchell at 5 is your last power threat in the entire lineup. And then you're getting 4 guys who are kind of like, well, they might hit singles or slap a double down the line, but you're really not worried about any actual power at the bottom of the order. I wonder if that maybe plays a role. Otherwise, I think it is probably more of just they want to get somebody who they believe is going to get the ball in play in spots where there might be a run scoring opportunity. And if there's anything Frelick is very, very good at, it is just putting the ball in play. So he's going to do that pretty consistently. And I think that is part of it. But yeah, it's kind of been a theme with Murph that he tends to hit somebody in the middle that you wouldn't really expect to be in the middle, and then somebody lower in the lineup that you kind of expect to be maybe more in the middle. And I keep coming back to that and thinking maybe it is just a matter of wanting to almost split up the lineup and be like, here's our top 4, here's our bottom 5, and we almost treat that as its own like top of the order after it clears the middle. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it's just something I've thought about with it. But that's all I can really come up with, because otherwise, yeah, I think the natural inclination would be Mitchell batting higher than Freely.
Yeah, I wonder if there is some sort of they want to have some power in the bottom. I would listen to your podcast with Jack, and yeah, I agreed with you on that point that like it seems like maybe they want to make sure that they get some power at the bottom part of the lineup so that it's not just a bunch of guys who are not really a threat to go deep that late in the lineup. You're not breaking it up that way. I also wonder, we know that they really prize things like, guys taking their walks and good swing decisions and all of those things. And the biggest difference between Mitchell and Frelick, besides obviously the power, is that Frelick doesn't strike out nearly as much as Mitchell does. And so maybe trying to stack those further to the top of the lineup and have him be in a sequence of guys who aren't necessarily going to strike out to kind of keep putting pressure on the pitcher to keep them honest, or to just kind of keep the pressure on them to have to be in the zone. Because you can get Mitchell out. Like, Mitchell isn't a bad swing decision guy. He's a weird swing decision guy, right? Like, he's very, very good at knowing what he can and can't hit. But, like, you can throw him strikes because he's not going to swing at some of those strikes. So we've detailed that all in the offseason, so there's nothing really new to add there. But I think it's probably something about that, too, that they just like the idea of having Frelick up there to keep the continuity of tough at-bats for the pitchers. People who are going to just be tough outs for those pitchers where there's kind of an out. Like, if you execute your pitches on Mitchell, you can get him out. Like, there's a way to do that in a way that maybe it's a little bit harder with Sal. So, but other than that, again, the big thing is what James said, which is batting order is extremely overrated, and it's really not worth worrying about. Like, especially, should this guy be hitting 5th and this guy 7th or the other way? Like, these things barely matter. The big things with batting order is get your guys who get on base at the top of the lineup, get the guys who hit for power right there behind them, and then everybody else behind after that. And like, you're not going to screw anything up too bad at that point.
Yeah, I think especially it looking like the default top of the lineup against lefties is Churio 1, Yelich 2, Contreras 3. Give me that any day of the week. I'll take those 3 to start a game anytime. And even on Sunday, we finally got a righty with Marcus Stroman, and then we saw kind of the modified with Terang at the top, then Churio, then Yelly, then Contreras. I think that's fine too. Obviously, that worked out well on Sunday. Terang got a hit, stole a base, and scored a run. I think that's the ideal scenario there. But beyond that, yeah, I think bottom of the order doesn't really do much for me. But I think appreciate having somebody like Sal in that second cleanup spot, so to speak, just because he is so contact savvy that if you've got a runner on, there's a better chance, I should say, of like a 2-out base hit to score a run there. All right, second question this week comes from Price Trozen, asking, contrary to the Eeyores on social media, I found the first game to have some encouraging aspects, especially pitching. What were your 1,000-yard view thoughts about how the staff was utilized for game 1 and presumably the series, since it'll be done by the time of the recording, unless something changes Sunday? This aged poorly fairly quickly. It did. Things unraveled. I mean, like I said, Freddie was pretty good, borderline great on Sunday, Spencer. Let's just start there. What did you see with Freddie that was at least encouraging, especially compared to everything else we saw soon after?
Yeah, I thought Freddie was really good, to be honest. He gave up the homer to Wells, which was only a home run in Yankee Stadium. So that one was a legitimate cheap home run due to the park. And then he gave up one other home run, obviously, but overall, he pitched quite well. I liked that he went to the changeup so often, and it was a very, very good pitch for him in that game. The fastball still isn't getting whiffs. I'm not sure it will ever really get whiffs at the same type of level that we used to see it, but I do think the secondaries are in a better spot, and he didn't even have to use the breaking ball too much because the changeup was so good. Overall, I thought he pitched pretty well. He was around the zone consistently. He wasn't walking many. There weren't many bad misses. He wasn't really missing over the heart of the plate very often. Even the home runs were not that bad of pitches. The Wells one was iffy, whether it was even a strike at the top of the zone. I think the only thing that was interesting to me about that was that he looked like he was cutting some of his fastballs, including that one. And that's something we haven't really seen from him since like rookie Freddie and maybe his first couple years. He used to cut his fastball, but now it's become more of like a normal four seam in terms of the movement. But even on StatCast, you could go and it was pretty close to 0 in horizontal movement, which is a sign that it's getting a little bit of cut action on it. So that was weird to see and interesting, but I don't know if that's going to be something we continue to see. I don't think he's trying to. I don't think he wants it to do that, but it is something he used to do when he was younger. So I'll be watching that. But overall, I was encouraged by that first start. I thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah, and I think in a way we saw how dangerous that park is. This is not a park that we see very often as Brewers fans. Like, this is not a place we're used to playing. Yeah, exactly. Though now we're going to see it every other year. So gird your loins, I guess, because that park is kind of a joke, especially if the wind is at all aiding the ball out. Yeah, if the wind isn't suppressing power, I still don't understand. I know that they said that the home run by, was it Volpe?
Volpe, the second Freddie one, was apparently like, what was it, 12 or 13 out of 30? But no, that seemed like a Yankee Stadium special for sure. I don't know if I trust the metrics on that.
Well, and especially because he seemed to pop it up into the jet stream, and then he just carried, because you could see, was it Mitchell? Mitchell just kind of whoever was tracking back on that ball, and it just kept going. And you're like, oh yeah, that thing just got popped up into the jet stream and carried out.
Yeah. Stupid park. I hate that right field.
It is. I think it just measures the actual distance and where it landed and whether that would have gone out of another stadium when it does that. So by where it actually landed, it probably would have been gone. I think it was 9, it said, out of 30. But it was still, I would still consider it pretty cheap on the scale there. It was pretty cheap, and it was definitely aided by the wind. It was, I mean, even live Buck didn't seem to think he hit it out at all on the call, and then it just went out with relative ease. So both of them were pretty cheap in reality.
Yeah, I think the ones, the Would It Dong thing, which is, by the way, back up on Blue Sky, so we got that going for us now, which is nice. That one, I think, was looking at launch angle and exit velocity. And saying that would have been out in using those things, and I still don't buy it. I'm like, that ball did not seem to be that well hit. I didn't think off the bat it was going out, and then it just drifted and drifted and drifted. So, but his actual question here, what did we think of the pitching utilization? Did we learn much this weekend? Because they were kind of behind the whole weekend. I think every reliever who came in, no reliever came in ever without a deficit. So we never saw how Murphy's going to line up his bullpen, even though those guys, I think mostly or all, did pitch this weekend. But we didn't see how he was going to deploy them, because they were being used more in a mop-up role just to eat innings and get through this weekend. So I'm not really sure that we learned a whole lot, but I don't know. Hudson looked better.
Opening day was probably the closest, right? Because you had Hudson as the bridge, but even then, he only threw 12 of 24 pitches for strikes, had 2 walks and a strikeout. Koenig got roughed up on opening day. He's looked rough, I guess, the first 2 times, because he came in on Sunday and immediately threw one to the backstop and let a run in. Only 10 of 21 pitches were strikes for Koenig on opening day. Payamps got an out, so you can't really say. Tyler Alexander's looked good, but I think you're right, Ryan. You can't really tell at that point what the order is. We finally got McGill into a game on Sunday as well, so I would expect it to be fairly similar to what it was first half of last year without Devin, right? So whether it's Koenig and Payamps as your 8th inning person, depending on what the batting order looks like, and then McGill. and then maybe Alexander and Hudson for more bulk. But we'll see how long that can keep up because they had to pitch a lot this weekend as well.
Yep.
Oh boy, that first series is going to be interesting at home. All right, the Park Ranger, first time, long time, writing in, how mad should we be when Freddie gives up a home run on a fastball after falling behind in the count? Even the hitter and everyone watching knows a fastball is coming. Should we expect Freddie to beat the hitter mano a mano, or is the obviousness of a coming fastball the problem itself? And it's about Contreras and Freddie making bad decisions. Spencer, we talked a lot last year about how Contreras likes to spam fastballs sometimes. Falling behind 2-0, first batter of the year, just trying to get a fastball there. And like you said, it was top of the zone, but when you're a left-handed hitter in the Yankee Stadium, about a 2-0 high fastball is a godsend, right? So I guess, what did you think of that pitch selection?
Yeah, for Freddie, I actually thought the pitch selection was overall pretty good. I do think even for a guy like Freddie, I think a 2-0 fastball is still fine. I think while they do know it's coming, I do think there's a pretty good chance they're still going to get beat. Miss the barrel, get them to pop up, fly out, something like that. I don't think it's a danger pitch for Freddie to throw a fastball in that spot. But it is more on him for falling behind. Like, it does put him at a disadvantage when he is at a 2-0 count. And it's not like, while I do think the secondaries are better, I think the changeup is the best secondary, and that's not really a land for a strike type of pitch. So it's not something you're normally super comfortable throwing 2-0. And he hadn't even thrown a breaking ball, especially to like Wells. He was first batter of the game. So landing one there and trying to steal a strike on 2-0 there is pretty tough. So I don't blame the pitch calling or anything on that particular one. Now, you bring me to the other two games, I might start complaining a bit about the number of fastballs that were called. I think that was an absurd.
Especially to Aaron Judge. Come on, don't do that.
Man, Savali threw 76% fastballs in his start, and he is a 7-pitch pitcher who has...
That's wild.
His best pitches are breaking balls. So that one, yeah, I'll complain about the pitch calling for Savali. For Freddie, opening day, I thought it was pretty good. In fact, he threw so many changeups that he ended up throwing a lower percentage of fastballs than the other two starters did. So the guy who's Fastball Freddie, it's his nickname. He has the best fastball in the starting rotation, is the only one who went away from it. And obviously he had the best results doing so. Yeah. So I do have pitch calling complaints from this series, but not opening day. I thought that was the one game that they handled pretty well.
Yeah, and I think also just understand that this Yankees lineup is hyper patient and is in putting themselves in a position to be able to hit. And so they're not going to go fishing at, off-speed breaking stuff outside of the zone very often in hitters' counts. Like, you're not going to get them to chase. You're going to need to put those type of pitches into the zone. And then you're going to need to make sure that they're not in the zone in such a place that the batters are going to tee off on them, which was a problem all damn weekend. So, I think this is just one of those things that, I don't see the issue here. The issue did come more with a lot of the pitch selection over the weekend, as Spencer talked about.
Yeah, and Nestor in game 2, obviously the record-breaking 3 home runs in 3 pitches, but he's very much a fastball just to get a strike early in the count kind of guy, and the Yankees obviously knew that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even going back to the World Series last year, I saw it pointed out that Nestor likes to just throw a quick fastball in like the hitter's best zone just to get him by surprise. And when you are looking for that, obviously you're going to hit a bunch of Titanic 450-foot home runs, especially when it's 80 degrees and the wind's blowing out. So to Spencer's point, the pitch selection itself was questionable, to say the least. We'll see if that gets cleaned up in the next week. I hope so.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of Nestor, let's talk about the Dinger Fest on Saturday and Sunday, because we mentioned Aaron Savali as well. A lot of ugly numbers we can point to. Kurt Hogue pointed out that the Brewers had never allowed more than 12 home runs in a 3-game series. They obviously allowed 15 this weekend, or that the Yankees never hit more than 8 home runs in a game. This is a team, of course, with like a 100-year plus history. So anytime you set a Yankees record or do something a Yankees never done before, that's a little concerning. And we did that multiple times. Austin Wells, first catcher to lead off a game with a home run ever in Yankees history also. So I guess the thing, though, that caught a lot of people's eyes were the types of bats the Yankees were using, the so-called torpedo bats, little funky shape. They basically adjusted where the barrel is, because they noticed last year Volpe and a lot of guys on the Yankees were hitting it on the label more often. They were getting jammed more often than they were barreling. So obviously, the solution from their analytics department was, well, why don't we just move the barrel of the bat? Which, we were talking in our group chat, and Paul's not here this week, but he's like, it's amazing that nobody ever thought of doing this before. Lots of questions about it, especially after a 9 home run barrage. I personally think, maybe we need a little bit more data to figure out how much of that was actually the bat and how much of that was the Brewers insisting on throwing fastballs down the middle to the Yankees all damn weekend. But, a lot of questions about it, a lot of questions on our Patreon. So let's get to Dale Doback asking first, how is a torpedo bat any different than a corked bat? Seems to be both are adjusting the weight distribution of the bat without having to make the bat longer or thicker. Ryan, obviously, we should say out front, MLB says these bats are legal. Mm-hmm. They follow every justification in the actual rule book. There's nothing in the rules that says you can't just move the barrel of the bat. But I guess your reaction to that question.
Yeah, that is the difference, is that this is allowed under what was in the rulebook. And I think this goes to show there's always going to be stuff that people will come up with, especially in this era of maximization of performance and all this. People are going to find ways to try to get around or just work within the rules to figure out what they can do to best maximize their potential. And that seems to be what's going on here. And we should note also, James, you have a little more information about this, but maybe now is a good time to mention it. They're not the only ones doing this. There are some Twins who are doing it. This thing is going to spread like wildfire around after this weekend. Everybody knows
it's a
about
copycat league.
Yeah. And you can't keep secrets in baseball, period, at all. Like, I bet you there were players who were talking about this after literally last night and saying, I bet you half the Brewers are like, hey, would this help me? Like, and starting to, talk to their analytics people and be like, hey, or even more likely, they've probably already looked at this and were investigating it, looking into it. And the Yankees get kind of the first mover advantage here, being the first ones to really make a big deal of it, though, like I just said, they're not the only ones doing this. So, yeah, the main difference here is the legality of it, and it is interesting. Like, this is an interesting thing. I think that I don't know if this has been handled the best way. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this, because I think my biggest complaint that I have right now is, how did we go through all of spring training and there wasn't a whisper about this anywhere? I listened to an absurd, just ask my wife, number of baseball podcasts, and they're all covering the news in great detail. A new bat would have showed up very prominently in a number of them.
I mean, think about how many times we talked about the see-through pants last spring. Somebody would have noticed a bat,
I mean, good Lord. Yeah. This is going to be the topic of discussion on the next Effectively Wild on whenever it comes out on Wednesday or whatever. Like, they're going to be talking about this. It is the talk. I was joking in our group chat. This story broke contain. It was on NPR. Like, when a baseball story hits NPR,
which happens when it's the Yankees. Yes.
Well, it happens when it's the Yankees, but also just like there has to be something like beyond baseball, something about it where like this is kind of going into the whole like, oh, is this cheating? Is it like, everybody has questions. And so I think the biggest thing here is that MLB has a responsibility to like front and center something like this when there's going to be inevitable questions about the legality of it. Apparently Trevor McGill stepped in it a little bit and was like, he said,
whining.
Well, no, but like, if I'm a pitcher, I would be, if this all of a sudden just Like, you watched your team get their brains bashed in, and somebody in the post-game press conference or in the dugout or in the clubhouse after the game comes to you and says, hey, what do you think of those Yankees new bats that are all the talk? And like, if I'm Trevor McGill, I would be like, yeah, well, of course the Yankees got away with that because, you know, they're the Yankees. And like, I would be bitter and like more than a little frightened about it too, because like, if it wasn't discussed and wasn't put out there in the open ahead of time, and we don't know for sure how much actually was out there, but the fact that this was, nobody knew about it, and all of a sudden the Yankees broadcast was like gleefully showing this during the game on Saturday, the fact that it broke out in that moment, this wasn't being discussed openly. This wasn't being, you know, openly shared around. There was a big amount of secrecy around this, and that's not really the Yankees' fault, but it damn sure is MLB's responsibility that if there's going to be a question about whether or not something like this, that is a change in the rule, or not a change in the rules, but something that's going to look different and people are going to go, wow, is that legal? Well, if and the Yankees and whoever else apparently went to MLB and said, is this legal? And MLB gave its blessing. Okay,
Yep.
Well, if somebody comes to MLB with something like that, your job now is to make it known far and wide to all the teams, to all the players, and thus it'll get out to the media that, hey, this thing is coming. And so everybody knows about it, and it will be a topic of conversation, you know, during spring training. But now all of a sudden it's like this little surprise bomb that popped up on opening weekend. And a cynical side of me says, well, MLB probably doesn't mind that too much because people are damn sure going to be talking about this on Monday.
Yep, they're talking about baseball.
People are going to be talking about baseball.
They want offense.
And also it's just people are going to have takes about this. Is it legal? Isn't it legal? People are going to have, you know, this is perfect for the sports takeocracy, right? Like, this is perfect for Stephen A. Smith to talk about on ESPN. Like, this is what Stephen A. Smith is for, is to do stuff like this. So I feel like MLB could have handled this a lot better and not had it like pop out as this big surprise. So but this, again, sorry, I don't want to make it sound like this is some conspiracy thing or that it's a huge deal. I don't think it's that big a deal. It's just a little irritating because we were the ones that apparently got, you know, caught by surprise on this and, you know, like had this embarrassment pop up. So yeah, it's a little bit irritating from that perspective, but ultimately this is mostly fun and it's mostly fine. I wish MLB would have handled it a little bit more openly than they did.
It's worth mentioning, Trevor McGill did make the New York sports sections on Sunday for whining about this and saying, of course, like you said, it's the Yankees that let them get away with it. But Pat Murphy was all for it. He was asked, according to ESPN and the AP, about it, and he said, quote, players are doing everything to try to get an edge today legally, and I think they should. I think whatever is good for the offensive game is good for the game. So, you know, there you go again. You know, we've had a period here, Spencer, where pitchers were sort of edging ahead in this cat and mouse game, right? With pitching labs and just conceiving of all these bastard pitches in the pitching lab, defying the laws of physics, seemingly, right? Like, I don't know. You might be biased because you're a pitching coach, but to me, it's about time the players had something to kind of even the playing field, right?
Yeah, I have no problem with this. I think honestly, I do think it's kind of cool. I think it's, like Paul said in our chat, and like you just said, I can't believe this wasn't thought of earlier, especially given that it is legal, or at least somebody didn't try it and ask MLB if it was legal earlier. Like, there's so many smart people in baseball, and apparently it took an MIT grad within the Yankees front office to be able to bring this to light. But like, it makes a ton of sense, and as long as it is within the rules that each bat needs to be a certain, you know, diameter in certain spots and all these different things, like, I don't see why it's an issue. I think it is more the fact that it caught everyone by surprise that is more. It's not even an issue, but it's just more of a questionable thing that happened. But I think, like Ryan said, MLB probably likes it because it is going to be up for a lot of discussion over the next few days, and honestly, probably even further than that, especially if the Yankees keep hitting like they did this series. I'm sure we're going to hear about it a lot more, but yeah, even like I think Rhys Hoskins said after yesterday's game, like I already ordered a couple of the bats.
Exactly.
Like this is
see, I was like, get Yelich one pronto,
yeah,
and
like
we'll see 40 home runs again. It's fine. Yeah.
yeah. So I
it.
mean, I bet you it's going to be all over the place within a couple of weeks, but it is interesting. And like a guy like Aaron Judge, he's using his normal bat. He didn't change anything. He just destroyed the Brewers with his normal old baseball bat. So this isn't anything that I don't think it flipped the series or did anything else, but I do think it's just kind of a cool baseball thing more than anything else.
I think that makes the most sense. It's I'm already sorry. I'm imagining
it just stinks
what
to be
takes.
on the receiving end of innovation. Yes.
Yeah.
Like
and
I get
to
it.
like be caught a little flat-footed on something like this. Oh, the other thing, yeah, because James, you were saying before we started recording that somebody approached Bellinger about this when he was with the Cubs last year, and he elected not to use it in games, but had seen something about it. Like even going back to last year, that this was something that people have been tinkering around with, that it wasn't necessarily an innovation from the Yankees front office necessarily, but it's something that's been floating around out there for a little while. We need to get more information. I think this is one of those things that we just don't have the full story yet, which is a little bit irritating too, because nothing is secret in baseball, and this managed to like fly under the radar. So how and why did that happen is a little like it's another part of the curiosity of this whole thing.
Yeah, so this is coming from that same ESPN AP article that had the Murphy quote at the end. It's the Aaron Boone says Yankees torpedo bats about being quote best, and Cody Bellinger mentions that somebody approached him last spring with like a model of this when he was with the Cubs, obviously. So that tells me that, this is something that some teams have been tinkering about, or like Ryan said, maybe have been talking about, but just didn't deploy it into an actual game until they got it just right. Obviously, like, using it in spring games is one thing, but players are very reluctant to mess with their actual regular season gear because that's how they get paid, right? So it just didn't feel right at the time, but I guess the understanding is that the Yankees either found a way to perfect this or scale it for every player. Obviously, like now with computers and laser cutting technology and all that stuff too, you're able to get things a lot more precise, right? And he tried it again this spring and really liked the balance of it, he said, so he switched to that. But we'll definitely see how many players latch onto this, because the idea of just specifically tailoring bats to individual players is kind of interesting to me too, right? Like using the metrics to find where you strike on the bat, because we can do that now, is really interesting to me. But I guess we'll see how it plays out. If the Royals show up in Milwaukee on Monday with a bunch of these bats too, maybe I get worried. I don't know. But like I said, it's 3-game sample. Opening day, the Yankees only scored 4 runs using these same bats too. Yeah, Volpe homered, whatever. Jazz Chisholm homered a bunch this weekend, but I kind of want to see how it plays out over a full season, not against the Brewers pitching, and see where we go from there. All right. Let's move on to Ultimate Vehicle Fight Club, who's asking, sort these based on how much the impact the following had on this series. 1, torpedo bats. 2, park factors. 3, Yankees hitting ability. 4, Brewers pitching ability. So I guess, Spencer, given those options, who's to credit, who's to blame for what happened this weekend?
Yeah, I would go Yankees hitting ability first. This is a very good lineup. They're very, very talented. They
made the World Series last year.
They made the World Series last year and added a guy like Cody Bellinger to the lineup this year. So it's a good offense. I would say second is Brewers pitching. I don't want to use Brewers pitching ability. I would say how the Brewers pitched in this series would be second.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that's their ability. Nestor Cortez and Aaron Savali are better than what they did in these 2 games. But that would be second. Then I would say park factors. That absolutely played a role. and then the bats are fourth. I mean, I would still say the bats maybe had a slight impact on things, but the other three things had a much bigger impact on the series.
Yeah, I was going to say that exact order with maybe you push park factors up, especially just the way that things were flying on Saturday. The Brewers scored 9. Now, I didn't watch most of that game. I watched the early going of that game, and I know the Yankees committed 5 errors. So I'm not sure exactly, like, those 9 runs that the Brewers had, how much of that was them and how much of that was just the Yankees being insanely inept defensively on that day.
Hey, man. Frank homered, so if that tells you about park factors at all.
Yeah. So I think that, yeah, park factors probably mattered quite a bit in this series. Not just the park, but also like what the weather was doing, especially on Saturday, I think really did matter. Though it was blowing in on Sunday, and both the Brewers and the Yankees hit balls out to right because the wind was more blowing in from the left. But I think mostly, and it was going to go for what Mark, well, we'll just take Mark's question next.
Mark Podscarby asking, how has nobody ever thought of, quote, making the hardest part of the bat where you hit the ball before? This is sort of Paul's point, Ryan.
Yeah.
Like, in 100 and whatever years of baseball history, nobody's like, let's change where the barrel is. You know, it's so simple, but somebody finally thought of it.
Yeah, I'm sure people have tinkered with it before, they've thought of it,
Sure.
but I think the points you raised about the fact that now everything can be measured so precisely, now we can get a really good idea of where the batters are actually hitting the ball on the barrel, like where on the barrel is the ball hitting. We can get a really precise understanding of that and how it varies from batter to batter, and also just we have a very precise idea of what, various launch angles and exit velocities, how that all interacts together. So, and now technology has also gotten to the point where you can, as you said, manufacture something to very exacting specifications in a way that you couldn't in, 100 years ago or whatever. So all of those things make it easier. But yeah, you would think that this would have happened sooner, that somebody would have, the way baseball is now with everything being optimized, you would think so. But the real question,
we had people trying to use Apple Watches to cheat before we started messing with the bats.
right.
Like,
yeah.
it seems so simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's also like this tradition of like the bats being, I'm sure a lot of the players, I wonder if Bellinger kind of wondered he didn't want to be like a first adopter and be out there by himself and be accused of like everybody. All of a sudden, people come in and go, he's cheating. And the MLB has to be like, no, the bat's legal. It looks weird, but it's legal. Because that's all going to happen. You're going to hear all that this week. It is going to dominate on the sports talkocracy. Like that is what's going to happen. But I really do wonder what MLB is going to do about this, because let's say this is a substantial change. Okay. Let's say that all of a sudden we do see a huge spike, and I'm talking like maybe 2019 levels, maybe beyond that levels of guys are just jacking home runs. And it is, things have like the balance of the game tilts even more towards home runs. I think MLB is going to do something about it, and I think they probably should do something about it. But I don't know where the line is and how exactly they would do that. I mean, obviously you can just write rules that specify like the bat has to be, whatever proportions or whatever. You can write rules to make this impossible. But how much tolerance is MLB going to have for this if all of a sudden everybody's hitting dingers? Like if this is a massive leap forward, and like it is way too early for us to know. That's the thing. Realistically, how much of an effect do you think these bats had is what Mark asked. It's way too early to know. We do not know yet.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I think it's possible that it's enough that MLB is going to want to and going to need to do something about it. Like,
Yeah.
You don't think that it's possible that this is going to have sort of open a Pandora's box and it's going to have gone too far and that MLB is going to want to reel it back in?
Maybe, but I guess, Spencer, what do you think?
I think they want more offense, honestly. So I don't think it will. And as long as it's available, as it's an option to everybody, I don't know how anyone could be feeling like they're at a disadvantage. As long as each team is able to get their hands on these and each player is able to get their hands on these and build it however they want to within the specifications that are allowed, I'd be surprised if they do anything about it. Now, maybe if it gets to a point where teams are pushing the limits on what's allowed and what's not even further, then maybe they have to step in. But I think within what they're doing, if they feel comfortable with it right now, I don't know if it's going to change.
Yeah, I really do wonder, because we saw them look at what happened after 2019. They reeled in the balls because they decided that was too many home runs, and it was resulting in people just swinging for the fences, too much of a home run or nothing approach. And people like MLB decided after 2019 they wanted to reel it back in, and they did reel it back in with the baseball. So like they've shown that they're and like one of the talking points you hear all the time about baseball now is that it's too much of a home run driven game, that we need to do more putting the ball in play and doing more that way. This could potentially upset that balance, right? Like this could potentially, and people weren't crazy about the balance as it was already. They wanted, a more diverse array of offensive skill sets being shown than just everybody, loading up and swinging for the fences. If this encourages even more loading up and swinging for the fences from, a bunch of guys who maybe didn't have it before because their natural swing didn't put the sweet spot of the bat into the zone to be able to hit home runs, and now they do. Mm-hmm. I think this actually could really be a problem from MLB from the perspective of what is the ideal mix of the way they want offense to look. But it's way too early to know that for sure. We just have to wait and see. But I think it's a potential issue for how the game plays. We'll have to see.
All right. Last question specifically about Saturday's beatdown. Lucre Suitcase asking, what's up with Nestor? How did that first inning happen? Spencer, in your pitching coach expertise, what went wrong there specifically?
I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. Part of it is that the Yankees knew exactly what his normal approach is, and the Brewers, for some reason, didn't expect the Yankees to know exactly what his approach normally is, and decided to go in and throw the first three pitches exactly how the Yankees would be expecting them to be thrown, which is basically a get-me-over version of a fastball and trying to get ahead. And all three of them they got jumped on. After that, I still think it was mostly just a case of too many fastballs from Cortez. I think it was not only that, but he was down in velo. He was down a couple miles per hour in velocity. So not only was he throwing a lot of fastballs, he was throwing worse versions of his fastballs than what he normally has. I didn't like the approach, but I also think he genuinely just had pretty bad stuff in that game. And that allowed for what was already not a very good approach to just become even worse in terms of results. And it is crazy looking back on that game. I wonder if that Volpe 3-run homer doesn't go out and it's caught at the wall or something, how different that game would have been. It was 4-3 at the time, 2 outs, and that ball sneaks out, and then the floodgates open. But he was looking a little better in that inning, and then it was over with at that point. But yeah, overall, I just think he had bad stuff. He had a bad approach. The Brewers had a bad approach, and the Yankees did not miss any of the mistakes that he made, which, to be fair, is pretty uncommon. I think sometimes people don't realize how often pitchers get away with mistakes. Mm-hmm. And the Yankees just did not have that happen this series. I mean, they hit every mistake the Brewers made, and that's impressive. That's a tip of the cap to them. Guarantee you next series they will not do that. They're not going to hit every mistake all season, but that's just happened to be how it went this first series. So it was a combo of all those things, I think.
Yeah, that's just baseball. That's to have the confluence of events, to have something remarkable like this 15 home run weekend happen. You have to have kind of everything go one way. You guys have to make mistakes, and guys can't miss mistakes, and everything. There has to be a little help from the weather, which there was. It all has to play together to have something remarkable like this happen, and that's really what we saw. I wanted to ask you, because we were stuck in Tampa traffic heading towards the Rays Stadium for that first inning, And Grindle really made it sound on the radio like Nestor was a little shell-shocked after the 3 home runs and was not really wanting to come into the zone, and that was then resulting in him falling behind and just compounding the problems from there. Would that be accurate from what you saw and what you looked at with it?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely was nibbling after that. He was not going to be on the attack after that, and it understandable to a degree, but yeah, I mean, you still have to throw your stuff and you have to go at guys, or it's just going to lead to more players being on base when you give up the home runs. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, first player since 1949, I think they said, to have 5 homers allowed and 5 walks in a game, and he only faced 17 batters. So only 7 batters were not a walk or a home run out of all of that. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, sorry I can't cite who it was, but it was on Blue Sky yesterday that this had been done before, but it had never been done.
I think it was Kurt or somebody. Yeah, it was like old-timey, right? Like back when guys would throw 9 innings and give up 10 runs.
Yeah, that 5 walks and 5 homers has happened before, especially in the live ball era of like the 30s and 40s when 20s, 30s and 40s when balls were flying out of parks all the time. But it had never happened in fewer than 35 batters faced was the number I saw. And this was 17 batters faced. And you go, oh, that's ugly. That really hurts. So just, you don't want to be on this end of this kind of a historic series. No. So yeah, just kind of brutal. This is one we need to put behind us as quickly as possible. The Brewers really could use a win on Monday afternoon. Like really use a win to just to wash the taste of this nastiness out of our mouths.
Yeah, this is one where normally I would be like, you never remember what the first or second series of the year played out as, but I feel like this is going to be the rare exception where we're going to remember a March or April series in September, even if it's just hopefully like, man, that was weird, and they turn things around after that. But I don't know. And that kind of leads us to our next question from Keith Keskinen, who will break the explicit tag here. So just if you have little ones in the car or whatever, just mute for the next 10 seconds.
Earmuffs.
Keith asks, first, what the fuck was on that shit? Second, if the Brewers lose 90 plus games this season, does org philosophy or spending change at all? This is where I'm like, it's one series, let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
But Ryan, here's your space to hold water for ownership, as someone would accuse you of doing.
Thank you, James. So yes. Okay. This is very early. It is, it's a little interesting because I was like, how, the first time they started 0-3 since 2015.
That wasn't a great year.
Noteworthy, and well, we're going to get to that in a minute, but it is a little bit. We watched it, we saw it, we can't unsee it. It's going to be haunting us in our nightmares for a while. So, but ultimately, if the Brewers do lose 90 plus games this season, let's just like take that at face value. Well, I'm going to need to know a lot more than that. Why did that happen? What were the reasons that those things happened? Who got hurt? Who regressed? What does the young core of players look like? Do we have guys that really are looking much more questionable than they did coming into the season, coming out of the season? Or was this a matter of, a rash of injuries or something went drastically wrong in one part of the roster? So we're going to need to know a lot more about why that would happen. I think that it would be a mistake to assume that like, if we have a 90, because they're going to have a 90 plus loss season sometime. Like that's going to happen.
Sure.
Like it's coming at some point. The question is going to be like, why did that happen? And also there's going to be an intention question because like if the Brewers are trending towards like 90 losses, do they pull the ripcord, trade some guys, there's somebody like Nestor Cortez, guys who aren't here for the long haul anyway. Do they sort of and start playing a lot more of the younger guys? Do they start pushing more towards the future and make the choice to, take some lumps now to be better going forward? Those are all possibilities. So we would have to see a lot more detail as to what is going on there. I know that isn't satisfying, but like how that they would achieve that 90 win or that 90 losses would matter a whole lot.
Yeah, and it's Spencer, to me, this is like, yeah, this is a supremely bad series and doesn't inspire a ton of confidence for the pitching staff, but also if you're projected for 80 to 82 wins, you're going to have some series like this too. So
Yes.
I guess, how do you kind of project going from here? Or similarly, if it does all crater, do you think they change the philosophy or not so much? Because it's worked to some extent in the regular season for the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, in all honesty, I don't really think they would change much about how they operate. I think they've seen too many good results from it. If this did happen to go this way, I don't expect it to. I think if it did happen, it would be because of something like Ryan talked about, where the injuries just keep piling up. I mean, right now, the starting rotation is 3 starters, and then it's a bunch of other like longer type bullpen guys. They have already basically 6 starting pitchers on the IL right now. There is a lot that's already going wrong currently. So if that happened, and especially if, say, this carried to the position side and it's a bunch of important starting players on the position side got hurt, then yeah, I guess I could see that happening. But I don't expect it to. I know the Brewers won one in the Yankees series last year, but they also got outscored by like 20 runs in that
That's
series
true.
last
Yeah.
year. Like they got crushed by the Yankees last year too.
That was
And
not fun.
2015 was the last time the Brewers went 0-3 to start the year. 2011, they did the same thing. So this is not some
Ooh,
sign of
nice
exactly how
pull.
this is not some end all be all on how the season's going to go. The Brewers have started the season really well. 2014, there's plenty of examples both directions. It's the first series of the season, and it was a tough one to watch. And normally I would be even more like, okay, let's relax, guys. But I get it. Like, this was very, very hard to watch. And I get why some people are freaking out about it. Like, I fully understand. But it is 3 games out of 162. Like, we're not even 2% through the season. So there is a lot of time left. Let's see how things start to even out as the season progresses. I'm certain that like Contreras, Yelich, and Churio are going to be. Churio figured it out a little bit as the series went on, but
Yeah.
those 3 were not very good in this series. Obviously, the pitching struggled. It's not going to be this bad. They will figure some things out and they'll get on track. But just again, taking it at face value, if they did happen to do that, I really don't think much would change, to be honest. Maybe Mark Encarnacio would be a little bit more inclined to say we need to add one name just to keep people happy, like almost to like bring back some faith in the team. He might spend on somebody just to go, okay, everybody's down on the team now. We need to bring in somebody just to get some excitement back for the team. But I don't think it would be a matter of doing it just because they think their entire plan doesn't work anymore. I think it'd be more in terms of like, okay, we just lost all the faith our fan base had in us. Let's try and bring some excitement back. So overall, don't think much would change.
Yeah, more of a PR move than like a true change in approach. Hey, James, you remember the old Sports Bubbler message board / website / extension of the JS? You remember that?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do.
There was a poster on there. First off, RIP. But there was a poster on there who always would talk about the baseball season when back then there were some bad starts. There were some bad times there. Mm-hmm. And they would always bring up like where we are in the terms of a football season. And it used to work really well. I was just
going to go there.
Yeah, because it's 16. It used to be 16 games, so football season, 162 games. But basically, if you were to look at this in terms of the football season, we're somewhere like early in the second quarter of the first game of the season is where we're at right now. How much do you know about your football team?
Well, if I know anything about Packer fans, it's that a bad first quarter in the first week is a perfectly acceptable meltdown over as well. So I don't know if that helps us any, Ryan.
Or a meltdown in the first preseason game too, could, or on draft day.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, let's move on. Last couple of questions this week. Ryan, you referenced this. Baseball needs more chest lettuce. Asking, I'm getting strong 2015 Brewers vibes from this team. Who is the first Brewers player traded before the deadline? So I guess uh, even if we don't, accept that this is going to be a train wreck like 2015, as Spencer mentioned, 2011. I actually just now remembered that series. That series did suck as well. I think it was like the Rockies they lost to got swept at home. It was bad. It was bad. But Ryan, let's start with you. If there is some sort of fire sale, who gets dealt? Because now that I'm looking at this, I'm like, I can't think of anybody who's bringing back like a Carlos Gomez return, so to speak.
Oh no, I don't think you would see something like that. You would, if Nestor Cortez rebounds and gets himself back in line here and is pitching reasonably well, he could, if he is pitching like he was last year, once the season settles in here, if he's doing that, then you could get a solid, but not obviously a Carlos Gomez or Lucroy return for him. Like, you're not getting that, but you get a solid return. If Rhys Hoskins has rebounded, he's a guy in the last year of his contract. You look at who's in the last year of their contract, and that's kind of the direction you would go to. You might also look at a pop-up reliever, somebody who maybe they have multiple years left on their contract, but it's a guy who has exceeded with their previous levels, their expectations, and maybe the Brewers say, hey,
or somebody.
McGill would be potentially a guy like that. Piamps, whoever's having a good year and you want to sell high on them and say, hey, you could even get a little bit of control years here, because worrying about the long-term health of the bullpen is not something I think any of us are really doing. That seems to be like the Brewers' core competency. So those are the sorts of guys, right?
Yeah. I'm going to float this out. Do you trade Freddie Peralta at the deadline if things get bad enough? Because you got another option on that year. You could get a little bit more value.
Yeah, I mean, I would consider it. I mean, I would obviously field different types of deals. Yeah. I would hear calls on it, but I do think you're basically you have a lot of expiring contracts in that rotation right now.
Savali,
Cortez,
Woodruff. Yeah, Cortez.
Woodruff.
Yep.
So you're looking at next year. It's going to be turned over pretty. It's going to be turned over a lot. I'm curious. Like, I think a lot of people have kind of been assuming Freddie will follow a lot of the other, like, trade him in the offseason at minimum. So obviously, if you're expecting that and you think it's where we'd be selling at the deadline, then yeah, he makes sense to do that. I think he's more likely to follow the Willy Adames path
me too.
of play it out and get the qualifying offer at the end of the year. I think the Brewers are more likely to take that path with Freddie, just partially because of the situation with the rotation, but also because I do think they view him as a leader, similar to kind of how Adames was, where they felt the value they would have by bringing or keeping him there would be more than what they were going to get in the trade. So Freddie's probably one I don't think they would, but yeah, I mean, Savali's another one because he's an expiring. I just all the expiring deals, like you said, and then like Ryan said, I think you'd have to look at multi-year relievers too, because you can turn over the bullpen pretty easily, and the Brewers have a lot of people who would be able to fill in those spots as well, or even better sometimes in the minors. So I don't expect that to be the case, but those are the types I would be looking at too.
Yeah, Freddie is really intriguing. I didn't think he didn't pop right to mind, and he should have in that case, because that really is.
That could get you a haul. Yeah,
he's the guy that could bring back multiple top 100 prospects, but you got to be careful about that stuff, because the way that everybody looks at the prospect rankings, it goes, but did we get like multiple top 100s, or what are they ranked in the team system? And the Brewers, oftentimes when they make trades like this, actually go for guys that are a little bit further down, or have just emerged, or have certain traits that they really like, and then everybody loses their minds when the trade happens, and then it turns out to have been a perfectly fine trade in retrospect. But yeah, I could see that one. I could see the Freddie thing. If they were to trade him, I could see there being meltdowns over that one, because the expectation people would have is we would need a Godfather offer, which means I want, like what did the Red Sox just give up for Garrett Crochet? People would want like that. and that's just not
Yeah.
realistic. So
Yeah. Bring me Jason Dominguez from the Yankees.
Right.
Yeah, no, you're not going to get that. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I bring it up, but I also have said before too, I do think I agree with you, Spencer, that they keep Freddie because hell, they need somebody to start games for them next year. And I don't know who else in the system is prime for that right now. So yeah, that I don't know. But worst case scenario, it's something you have to look at too. All right. Postman asking which franchise is more unlikable, the Yankees or the Cardinals? Spencer, for me, this is still unquestionably the Cardinals, but I have also been softened to the Yankees because I went to college in New York and know plenty of perfectly fine Yankees fans. But what do you think?
It is so easily the Cardinals for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if I were an AL East fan, my answer would be the Yankees if I were a fan of a different team in the AL East, but like it's easily the Cardinals. The Cardinals have just been the bane of my Brewers fandom existence for so long. And obviously that hasn't been the case lately, luckily, but I do think it's going to change again soon because of their new front office that will be taking over next year. But it's pretty easily the Cardinals for me. And yeah, I just don't have that big of an issue with the Yankees. They're annoying. I don't love big market teams just because of the way they get covered and everything else, but it's not really their fault. I don't really blame the Yankees for that. It's just they're a little annoying in that way. But the Cardinals far and away for me.
Yeah, 100%. Familiarity breeds contempt. So the Cardinals, just because we've been in that division for the last 25 years, but we were in the Yankees division for the previous 20-ish years before that. And I'm not old enough to really have firm memories of hating the Yankees because the Brewers were going up against them and that was a thing. But I'm sure I would if I, was a little bit older than I am. So, yeah. The other thing here is the fans. The Yankee fans have a very we're the best. We have the most rings, but they're also like excessively hard on their own team, which these Cardinals fans are too. But the Yankees fans have kind of a we want you to hate us sort of thing. Like we're the best and the world is best when you hate us because that means we're doing really, really well.
They love being the heel in pro wrestling terms, right? Like
exactly.
Exactly.
Whereas the Cardinals have the whole BFIB thing, which is so insufferable and that's another level of and the Cubs have this too, where the lovable losers thing, the Cubs fans thinking that you shouldn't hate them because they're the lovable loser. No. You gave that up when your team started actually competing and winning. You gave up the lovable loser thing. Now you're just another big market team that we all get to hate. Sorry. So the Cardinals, the BFIB thing, insufferable.
No. The Yankees are better fans than the Cardinals fans are, and I'll just leave it at that. Bob Peterson asking 4.5. How would you bet this over under for the number of games that Connor Thomas pitches before being sent back to the Cardinals? What potential did the Brewers see in Thomas, and were they overconfident in the pitching lab? So Spencer, obviously, Connor Thomas waited a long time for his major league debut. It did not go very well at all. No. Do you see him sticking around just because he can provide some length while they're waiting for starters? Or did you see enough to be like, yeah, this isn't it?
No, I do think he can stick around, and it's a tough time to come into a game when you are facing a lineup that is feeling very, very good about themselves, wind blowing out, everything else we talked about. And when your catcher just keeps throwing down fastballs for them, that's not helping either. So somebody who's, sweeper is considered probably his best pitch. His changeup considered one of his better pitches as well. And later in the outing, he started going to that more. And to be fair, the Yankees did hit each of those a couple of times too. But overall, I think it'll hit the over. The potential they saw in him is in relation to having all of these different pitches to throw. He didn't use the cutter much. I think they wanted him to use the cutter more coming in, so that was a little weird. But overall, I don't think they were overconfident in the pitching lab. I just think they genuinely saw something they really liked in Thomas and thought they were going to be able to get more out of him. And I'm just not going to overrule that could happen still right now after one outing. He looked good in spring. He had a really solid spring. You saw good things from him. Doesn't mean it's going to carry over to the regular season, but I'm also not going to rule out that he's going to figure some things out just because of his opening day or debut or his major league debut not going very well. We've seen rough debuts from pretty good pitchers at times as well.
Well, he was also brought into an impossible situation, like a raucous Yankee stadium with blood in the water, with all these guys hitting home runs,
Right.
with a bad weather situation, and like everybody looking to tee off, and like also just the fact that the lineup was already set up how they wanted to face a lefty starter, and he's coming in lefty following a lefty, and like it was a confluence of all those things, and then it went badly early for him, and then it's a snowballing situation, and that's tough. But I think Bob is right here to point out that he might not be long for the Brewers, because this is a hard thing they're trying to do. Trying to carry a guy for an entire season when you're trying to contend the way the Brewers are, trying to thread this needle is very difficult to do. And we saw it a couple of years ago with Gus Varland that lasted 4 or 5 outings before they pulled the plug on that one and said, yeah, we just can't do this. And so the fact that it's going to be hard for them to do this, because Connor Thomas, if he's not good relievers in this bullpen, you can have not good relievers in the Brewers bullpen the way it's set up, but they can't stay long because you have to shuffle them around for the next guy and keep turning it over. And so the fact that if Thomas isn't getting outs, there's not really going to be a viable way to keep him on the roster for very long. So I think 4.5 makes a lot of sense to me. He's going to have to get better, and he's going to have to get better. The results are going to have to get better relatively quickly, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Gonna have to put up zeros. Morgoth 10, our last question this week, asking 10 minutes into the FanDuel Sports era of Brewers baseball, and this broadcast is trash. Was I the only one that could only see half of William Contreras because of the green screen ads? I don't know if I experienced this at all.
No.
Spencer, were you seeing anything either? Were you watching on the app?
Yeah, I was on the FanDuel app, and I did not notice that at all. I actually was going to say that since they changed over from Bally to FanDuel, and I've been using it for Bucks games and stuff too, there's been like no crashing. I haven't really had any issues with it since they made the switch over, and really it was just changing the design. It's basically the exact same thing, but
yeah,
I have had a pretty good experience with it. In all honesty, I was expecting it to stay the same and not work at all, and that was my experience with the Bally app last year, but I've actually not had many issues, and I would say the green screen ads would probably be more in line with the way they have it set up. I don't think that would be specific to the FanDuel app. I would imagine that would have been on everything. So, yeah, I don't know. I didn't notice that as possible that was happening. I just wasn't looking that closely at Contreras when the pitches were coming in or what it was, but I definitely did not notice that.
I'm assuming he's talking about this was on Saturday, correct?
I would think so.
Yeah,
I was on the Yes Network.
The Thursday game was on ESPN, so it wouldn't have affected that.
Yeah,
I haven't noticed anything, and I know, Ryan, you were saying you're setting it up when you're getting home and haven't been able to see that yet, but it seemed fine to me today. Actually, it just looked like the regular Yankee. I don't know if the Yankees have green screen ads or not. It looked like their usual ads behind home for me, but teach their I don't know. We'll keep a close eye on how the FanDuel Sports app goes through the year, because we were unexpectedly thrown another year of that, and I had to renew a subscription. So cool. Love that for myself. But yeah, to Spencer's point, it didn't crash it for me this weekend, although I admittedly turned the Saturday game off early. But yeah, it's been good so far for me. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Thank you for the questions this week, everyone. Again, a reminder, patreon.com/MKE tailgate is where you can go to sign up for as little as $2 a month to get that question priority, to make sure your questions are asked and answered every week here on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Even if you're not a patron, you can support us another way. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you are listening to this right now. And please give us a 5-star review, especially now that the season has started. And while you're there, if you haven't already, hit subscribe or the follow button to make sure you don't miss an episode. That'll do it for this week. Hopefully, the shift in venues has better results for the Brewers. 7-game homestand coming up against the Royals and the Reds. The optimist in me says, hey, they could be 7-3 after that, or at least above 500, or hopefully just get a win. As we said, Monday would be very nice to just get a win out of the way, because I don't feel like wringing my hands all week waiting for that first win. But we'll see what happens. Enjoy the games, everybody. If you're heading out to AmFam, we will be back here next week to talk about it all here on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Have a good one, everyone.
Fair weather fan, it's not what